The Gemara says that in the mitzvah, the yesod, foundation of the part of the Torah which deals with mitzvot that affect a man and its fellow man, it's called Ben Adam L'Chaveiro, where the Torah says you're supposed to treat your fellow man with respect, dignity, with consideration, with kindness. You're not supposed to fool him or cheat him or steal from him. There's one mitzvah that is outstanding and above all. That is the mitzvah being done b'kaf zechut, to judge a person to the good. If in doubt, judge a person to the good. You see a person doing something, and it may be the right thing, or it may look like the wrong thing, and there is a possibility he's doing what's right, but it appears to be wrong. In any event, if you are in doubt, judge him to zechut. Down the kaf zechut. Zechut means to the right side, not the kaf chov, to the guilty side. This is an outstanding mitzvah. Generally, the Gemara says that a person who does that, whose habit is to judge all people to the good, in heaven they always return measure for measure. So whatever this person himself does, in heaven they say, let's judge him for the good. Even though heaven has no doubts, they know this person's real intentions, still they say, as long as there's a possibility of weighing his action slightly towards the good side, do it that way, because the way he deals with his fellow man, that's how he's to be dealt with. To what extent does this rule apply? The Gemara tells us two different cases, but very unlikely. One case, a man who lived in the Galil, and he came down, Galil Ha'elyon. The Galilee has the upper Galilee and lower Galilee. Like, for instance, Safed, the upper Galilee, that's on a mountain. The lower Galilee is Tiberias, in that vicinity. A man lived in the upper Galilee, who was not wealthy. He came down to the lower Galilee to work. He hired himself out as a worker by a rich man. This was, of course, not the lower Galilee, as he went further down to the south. He worked there for 3 years' time. At least 3 years' time, of course. He had room and board. But he didn't work for the sake of room and board. He worked for the sake of his pay. After 3 years, he decided to return to his home with all his wages. The time for the completion, the termination of his work was the day before Yom Kippur, end of Yom Kippur. On that day is a time when each person takes an accounting of himself and sees that he pays off all his debts and so on. So the worker came to the master, and he said to him, give me my wages. I must go back to my wife and children. I must provide for them. So please pay me what you owe. The owner said, this master said, I'm sorry, but I have no money. It means I have no cash on hand. I can't pay you now. So this worker said, well, in that case, give me fruit. You have fields. Give me some fruit. For the amount, I'll be wages. The fruit I could take with me, I could sell it. The owner said, I'm sorry, I have no fruit either. So he said, well, give me a parcel of land that will amount to this sum. The owner said, I have no land either. He said, give me an animal, cow, steer. He said, I don't have any. So he said, give me something that I can handle, like give me some white goods, quilts, blankets, sheets, pillowcases, anything. So he said, I'm sorry, I have nothing. This man was very sad. He took his little knapsack and he returned home. Went back to his house without any wages at all. After the holiday, after Sukkot, the owner took this man's wages with him, the exact amount of wages he had earned, and he also filled 3 mules, one with the best type of food, and one loaded with drinks, and one with expensive type of clothing. He went to this poor man's house, to the worker's house, The worker invited him in. He sat there for a meal without telling him anything. He invited him, told him to sit down for a meal. After the meal was over, the owner gave him the wages plus this extra bonus. Then the owner turned to this poor man and said to him, I want to ask you a few questions. When I told you that I have no money at all, you asked me for your wages. I said, I have no cash at all. Knowing that I'm a wealthy man, what did you think of me then? What did you suspect me of? The worker said, truthfully, I thought most probably, you had just at that moment invested in some unusual buy, a chance to buy certain kind of goods at an unusual price, and you put all your ready cash into it. He said, well, when you asked me for an animal, and I said, I have no animals at all. You know my fields are filled with animals. What did you suspect me of then? He said, I figured perhaps that you had rented out all your animals to others. They were rented, they're not yours at the time. When you rent something, you lease something, you're not the owner anymore until it leases up. He said, all right, well then you asked me for a parcel of land. What did you... And I said, I haven't. What did you suspect me of then? He said, I thought for sure too that you had leased your land to someone else to work the fields, then you would divide the profits. He said, when you asked me for fruit, what did you suspect me of then? I said, I have no fruit. He said, I figured perhaps that you had not yet taken off Maaser. Fruit is considered forbidden fruit until you attempt to give it to the Kohen. So perhaps you hadn't taken Maaser off yet, and therefore you couldn't give it to me. It's forbidden. He said, when you asked me for any items I have in the house at all, what did you suspect me of when I said I have nothing in the house? He said, well, I thought perhaps you had at that moment said that you were making hekdesh, kodesh. You declared all your property at home as holy to Hashem by giving it to charity. So the owner said, he swore by all that is holy, exactly as you thought in your mind. That's exactly what happened to me. Everything you said would happen to me. I couldn't get myself to say it to you because it seemed unbelievable. I felt very badly. At that moment, I had declared all my property as holy to Hashem because of my son, who I felt was not learning enough Torah. I didn't want him to inherit me. My son was Hurricanus. And of course, it's a different story. This is a famous story in the Gemara, showing how these famous people in the Gemara are related to these stories that pertain to law. This was the father of Rabbi Hurricanus, who was one of the greatest rabbis in the Gemara, who the father thought he wasn't learning, and then he found that he was hiddenly a great tzadik. But at the time, he had declared his property kodesh. He found out, of course, later that it was an error, and it was voided. So he said, at the time I had declared my property all kodesh, and I had nothing to give to you. Now, because you had judged me to the good side to zechut, I bless you that Hashem should always judge you for zechut, too. Now, this is one case. Of course, this is an unusual case. We say about judging a person as zechut, it doesn't cost you anything if you see someone doing something that's questionable, and you say, well, I'll judge him for zechut. It's no expense to you. Here, the extent of judging the kaf zechut, even where the worker was losing so much by it, appeared to be losing so much, and was so heartbroken after working 3 years, still he held nothing in his heart against the master, the owner, because he judged with the kaf zechut. The second case, the case of Rabbi Yehoshua, one of the chief rabbis of the Gemara, he was called the wisest of all Jews, and this was a case where the Chachamim needed something from the governess, like the queen of that kingdom. And in order to get this favor from her, they said which one of the Jews would be able to persuade her to give the Jews his favor. They decided upon Rabbi Yeshua, who was the cleverest of all. Rabbi Yeshua went together with his students. When he came to the house of this matron, this woman, he got to the door, he took off his tefillin when he was 8 feet away. He came to the door, he entered, and he closed the door, he locked the door behind him. That means he was left alone there with her. Then, when he came out, he didn't speak to his students, he first went to the mikveh. Then, when he came back, he said to the students, "Tell me, when you saw me take off my tefillin, what did you suspect me of?" They said, "Simple, we thought for sure you cannot bring tefillin into a place of tumah. This woman was not Jewish, and the place is tumah." He said, "Fine, that's simple. But when you saw me lock the door behind me, what did you suspect me of then?" They said, "We figured you had to speak something very privately. It's a matter pertaining to the kingdom, and the Gemara warns against having ears eavesdrop. As the Gemara says, the walls have ears. So be careful to see that nobody hears, because you never can tell who might overhear and spread the word in the wrong place." He said, "When I came out and I went to the mikveh, this can only mean after being with a woman. What did you suspect me of then?" They said, we figured perhaps that something of her might have touched your clothes from a distance. And anything that has to do with the goyim is tameh makes you consider yourself tameh. Not legally, but one who's that particular wants to be completely pure, he goes to the mikveh. That's all we thought." And he said, "Exactly as you said, so was the case. Just as you have judged me for the good, for zechut, so may Hashem always judge you for zechut." The second case, of course, is a little different, because the Gemara warns there is a big difference. We mentioned before that when you see a person doing something and there is a doubt, there's a possibility of judging him in a way that would condemn him or a way that would condone his action, you must judge him to the good. In the case of a person's rabbi, the Gemara says that when you see him doing something which is definitely bad, definitely a guilty act, you still have to judge him for the good. Even though there's no question about the act being a wrong one. You have to say that certainly he did something wrong, but immediately afterwards, without any question or doubt, he did Teshuva. And in doing Teshuva, the act was erased as though it didn't exist. And therefore, in your eyes, it should be as though it did not exist at all. You cannot keep in your mind a bad thought about the rabbi immediately after it was done. This must be in a positive sense, not in a sense of doubt. A person who suspects, in general, in a case of doubt, that he suspects the rabbi of doing something wrong, the Gemara says this is as though he suspects Hashem chas v'shalom. So great a sin it is. But in all cases, regardless of who the person is, a Jew should accustom himself to look at the better side at all times, judge every Jew for the good, no matter what happens, and in that case, he will find favor in the eyes of heaven. We mentioned many times the case of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Arizal, who was known as the Melitz Yosher, the Ohev Yisrael. He was one who showed such a deep love for Jews. He became famous to the point that thousands of stories are told about him. And if he'd see a person committing a crime, open sin, he would never think badly of the Jew. There are stories told that he saw a person eating on Yom Kippur, and he said to him, "You're not committing a sin, I'm sure. I'd never perish the thought that you're breaking Kippur. Undoubtedly, you must have forgotten that it's Kippur. Certainly. This person you're speaking to is a very wicked Jew." very spiteful. So he mocked this great rabbi, and he said, oh no. He said he knows his kippur, and he's still eating. He was undaunted. He said, of course, you know it's kippur, but I know why you're still eating, because you probably sick. And the doctor said if you don't eat, then this might be injurious to your health. It might be peril to your life. Therefore, you are allowed to eat. This man said, no, he's as healthy as a horse. Still eating. He said, well, he walked away and he said, well, it's still very nice. He said, Hashem, your Jews are remarkable people. See, they have such good qualities. And here's a man who under no conditions will tell a lie. Look at the truth in the Jew. He won't lie for anything. In other words, he'd find the silver lining in everything. He'd look only for the good. He would never come back with a bad report about a Jew no matter what. This, of course, is an extreme case. In all cases, he was known to interpret a person's actions for the good. If we cannot reach his level in that, his madrega, at least we must try, for the sake of fulfilling the desire of Hashem, that every Jew should regard his fellow Jew as superior to himself. The Ramban was lived in the time of the Ramban, only he was known as the Mikubal. He learned Kabbalah. The Ramban writes that in a letter to his son, that always consider the person you're speaking to as better than you. If you are 1,000 times more learned than he is, a bigger chacham, or more religious, consider him still better than you. Because if you commit a small sin, you're held responsible. When he commits a big sin, he might be excused for it. He doesn't know any better. And surely, if he knows how to learn better than you, you should surely consider him superior. So no matter who you speak to, always consider yourself on a lower level than they are. This will give you the modesty, the humility that will bring you to every type of kedusha of holiness. And above all, the main item in dealing with a fellow Jew is this mitzvah of being dan lekaf zechut. Arizal adds a very vital point that is overlooked by so many. Arizal brought it up. Arizal says that if you are dan a rasha to the good side, what's going to happen? This rasha will be taken aback so much by it. They'll say, here he did something so wrong, and instead of being condemned for it, the Jew sympathizes with him and says, you're probably a good person, you're not doing wrong. He's consoling him. The rasha will feel embarrassed, and he will do Teshuva automatically. Plus the fact that by seeing the good side of the rasha, you'll find he's not really that bad. There's a reason for what he's doing, and he has good points about him, so that he's not the wicked person you thought he is. Arizal says, note, that this same action could be used within a person himself. Many times a person feels so dejected, that he says, I've fallen to such a low level, I don't see any hope for myself because I have so many bad deeds that I do. When I finally do something that's good, it's so tainted, it's so weak, it's so bad that even that good deed I do is no good. Here I go and put on tefillin. Tefillin is considered the crown of Hashem. It's so great how much luckier, better off I am than those Jews who don't put on tefillin. When I think of it, I say, what's the use? When I put on tefillin without kavanah, I rush and put them on without respect for the holiness of tefillin, so even when I do mitzvah, it's no good. But this can bring a person down to a low level of sadness, dejection. Arizal says that a person should use this power of dan lekaf zechut for himself. Seek the good points within himself. When you find that good point, dwell on it until you feel a degree of simcha, of happiness within yourself, and you'll find that you are being elevated. No longer are you a rasha, but you are on the level of tzadik. This way you'll drag yourself out of this mire, and you'll begin to serve Hashem with much more intensity, with much more happiness. So the person must be dan lekaf zechut, not just his fellow Jew, but even himself too. that by doing that, you take that person or yourself out of the madriga of Rasha into the madriga of tzadik. The Gemara says that there are many mitzvot that we do today which we perform happily. There's a certain simcha about it. And others that simcha is lacking. What is the reason for it? For example, the mitzvah of a brit milah. A brit milah in general is accepted as a very happy occasion. First place, a man has a son, that alone is already something to be happy about. He celebrates. Secondly, the brit milah is something that's considered a festive occasion where people come. There's an aura of elation there, simcha. We have a case of marriage, which is simcha. It should be simcha. It should be happier than a brit milah. Yet we find that marriage is never as happy as a brit milah. In a brit milah, no arguments arise. Everyone is happy at the time. At marriage, there's always arguments. The Gemara says there cannot be a marriage without a battle first between the consuegos. Bride side, the groom side. This one says they want the wedding this way. This one wants the other way. This one wants the bride's parents to give more money towards the wedding. This one wants the other side to give more money. There's always the arguments about money. Whenever the ketubah, the marriage contract, is written, how much to write down? 4 5s or 5 5s. So much money in the ketubah, marriage contract. There's always a battle, always a dispute over it. Why is the simcha brit milah so pure and filled with simcha? And why is the marriage ceremony, that is that which precedes the marriage ceremony, when it comes to the ketubah, finally they're all happy. Until they get to it, they have to get over the hurdle of this controversy, dispute, which sometimes brings out the worst in a person. The reason is that it's the way the mitzvah was accepted originally. Mitzvah brit milah was accepted with happiness. As King David says in David, Sas anochi al ibratecha. I'm very happy about this mitzvah, which came through the word of Hashem. First mitzvah Hashem gave to Avraham Avinu, and I feel simcha over it. It was accepted with simcha by Avraham Avinu too. So originally it was accepted with simcha, and therefore this simcha remained for ages. The law of marriage, which meant that there is a restriction. No longer can the bride seek other suitors. No longer can the husband go out and seek other others, or no longer can the husband marry certain people. Once he marries this bride, then there are certain women that now he is forbidden to marry. Anyone related to the bride now is forbidden to him. So when this mitzvah was given, the Chumash to that tells us that the Jews cried over it. They were sad over this mitzvah, and because it was accepted with sadness, there remained this controversy, this ill feeling, till the end of time. And until Mashiach comes, the Gemara assures us that there cannot be a ketubah, a marriage contract, without some kind of a battle that must take place. It's not a happy thought, and of course, knowing this is going to take place, people should prepare for it. In other words, get the right type of weapons. The best weapons are a willingness to compromise, to give in, and to make peace. Naturally, every rule has its exception. There are some rare cases where it goes through without any dispute, without any argument, but in those cases too, hiddenly, if it doesn't come out in the open, then it might be in feelings alone. This is a fact that must be experienced. The Torah tells us that there is no such thing as a ketubah without an argument of some kind, without ill feeling. We have to believe that that it's there. Some people are too polite to bring it out openly, but they have a resentment within them. But that exists in every case. The exceptional cases are where it doesn't come out too much in the open, or possibly even at all in the open. The average case, of course, is where there are open arguments that reach a heated degree at many times. There have been cases where, the match was broken just before the wedding ceremony because of these arguments. The reason for this is the origin of the way the mitzvah was accepted in the first place. The Gemara tells us there's a pasuk in the Torah which says, Ze keli v'anvehu. This is in the Shirat Hayam. We say the Az Yashir every day. Ze keli, this is Hashem. V'anvehu means that I will beautify him. The Gemara says, how do you beautify Hashem? What is meant by beautifying Hashem? The Gemara says, beautify the mitzvot of Hashem. Whatever mitzvah Hashem gives you, beautify it. In other words, Hashem tells you there's a mitzvah to build a sukkah. You might buy a sukkah, build one of the cheapest type of wood, plywood, or remnants, and put up the cheapest type of sukkah. And it's still kasher. But this is a mitzvah, beautified. Spend extra money on it, because that is fulfilling mitzvah, beautifying the word of Hashem. When the Torah tells you to get an etrog, a lulav, you can buy a kosher one for $10, you buy a kosher one for $30. Whatever it is, the more money you spend for it, it is not wasted. You are fulfilling the mitzvah of beautifying the name and the word of Hashem. Torah says you should wear tzitzit, wear tefillin, or various types, all like kasher to a certain degree. The more you spend for it, the greater the mitzvah. Torah says mezuzah, you can have the same sefer Torah. The writing could be one that's kasher yet cheap, just passable. You can get one that's very expensive, written by a great tzadik. The more that is spent, the richer the reward, because of the fact that if you show your anxiety to beautify the word of Hashem, so will Hashem in turn beautify your home and your life. Another rabbi says there's another interpretation for this word. Ze keli. This is my Hashem, the anvehu. Naveh comes from the word na'eh, beautify. But the anvehu is a combination of two words. Va'anvehu, va'ani, vahu. I and he. This means, this is my Hashem. I shall try to emulate, to copy Hashem, to be like him. I will be like Hashem. How? We know that Hashem possesses the traits of mercy, kindness. Just as Hashem is kind, pitiful, compassionate, forgiving, so too should a Jew follow the lesson that Hashem teaches us, these qualities, follow these qualities of Hashem, and also to be kind and considerate of others. With this, he is fulfilling the mitzvah of Ze Keli V'Anvehu, to resemble Hashem's action. The Gemara tells us something which requires a clarification. It's very said that this clarification is not found more within the Gemara itself. In other words, it's sadly unknown to most people. Now, we would skip this statement, except for the fact that we are fortunate in having the information clarified, but therefore we can't say it openly. The wording in the Gemara is that when the sin of eating from the tree of wisdom was committed, how was it done? The Nachash, the serpent, came to Chava, persuaded her to eat from this fruit, and then she gave from this fruit to Adam. The sin was completed, And the world was plunged into an era of death. The angel of death came to the world. Yemena says, when the serpent came to persuade Chava, it was not just making her eat from the tree of wisdom, but he also seduced her and injected into her this tameh seed, and this seed remained, meaning that whenever it came from her, any child born from her contained part of this tum'ah. The tum'ah is called zohana, a very evil tum'ah that came from this serpent. Any people born, later generations, had this evil within them, this tum'ah, and this remained until the Jews stood at Mount Sinai. They stood at Mount Sinai, then they were released from this tum'ah. They were cleared of it. There was no more tum'ah left. Another rabbi says that this tum'ah was removed earlier than that. Part of it was removed by Avraham Avinu. He gave birth to Ishmael and to Yitzchak. The evil left him in the form of Ishmael. Yitzchak came out pure. To a degree, it still wasn't that purified. Yitzchak Avinu gave birth to Yaakov and Esav. Again, major part of this tum'ah. As the balance of the tum'ah came out in Esav, Yaakov came out clear. Proof is that Yaakov gave birth to 12 tribes of Israel, 12 tribes of Hashem. So that we see that it was so pure there was nothing left of the tum'ah of the Nachash and the serpent. From then on, the Jews of Bnei Yisrael, all holy. This is the debate between these two rabbis. Now, Bnei Kadosh Arizal says that woe is to that person who accepts these words literally, chas v'shalom. Not because of the fact that we are stating something that is so low about Chava, who is the creation of Hashem. Aside from that, that's not the point. But the Arizal says, woe is to that person because this would be in the form of idiocy, idiotic, to think that at that time, when the serpent was so advanced, and they were in heaven, Gan Eden, that this could be taken literally, then there was any thought of seducing or anything physical attached to it. There was nothing at all physical involved. This injection of this seed did not mean physical. It meant spiritually, just as when a person, Chas v'shalom, speaks to a rasha, or speaks to a philosopher, he learns this philosophy. He absorbs the philosophy from this rasha, that goes into his mind, becomes part of his way of thinking, Chas v'shalom, and it's very difficult for him to clear his mind from that afterwards. His faith is by me not affected. That's why we say that in our stresses, all the great tzaddikim in the past stressed to avoid at all costs this poison of learning philosophy or having discussions with philosophers. Even if you think you can defeat them in a debate, still you stand to lose, because just hearing their words alone will inject some of this poison into your mind. Now, this is what's meant by the seed that was injected into Chava by this serpent. This poisonous seed of kefirah, of atheism. The serpent taught atheism. Chas v'shalom, not to listen to the word of Hashem, to disavow, to rebel against the command of Hashem not to eat from the tree of wisdom. This was an act of atheism, and this idea he injected into Chava, and because she had it within her spirit, therefore children born afterwards had this too, until it was purified. This, though, the Zohar Kadosh says too, that not to have waited until Mount Sinai to get rid of it, but she got rid of it with the birth of Cain. This seed was what produced Cain. spiritual seed that produced part of Cain, the first son, and because the spiritual seed was such that it contained the ideas of the serpent was a killer, the angel of death. This is what brought about the murderous instinct in Cain to kill his brother. But there too, Zohar stresses that this was not a physical act, chas v'shalom. This was a spiritual act, or an oral act, which affected the spirit. And this can be hereditary, chas v'shalom. A person whose mind is bad, mind of a rasha, could hand that over to his children, chas v'shalom. Of course, every child is given free choice. If he inherits these traits, and he starts off wrong right there, starts off with difficulty. That's why the stress is put so strongly on avoiding any contact with the modern day serpents who are the philosophers, who inject this poison into anyone they meet. Baruch Hashem that we was zocheh to learn the words of Arizal who warned us against that. We avoid speaking to, or reading the books written by them. We have Baruch Hashem enough Sefarim of Kedusha written by the tzadikim of all generations. One final item. It says that there are two cities. In one city, the wine of that city is very good, it's excellent, it's superior to any other wine. Another city, the waters are like mountain waters. They draw a person to them. They're of excellent quality, far superior to any other place. And then it says that the 10 lost tribes were destroyed by the wine of that city of Gita and the water of the Yumsit. This wine and waters draw a person to them, and this brings out physical desires, which automatically take a person away from spiritual value. They stop to study up to that. They go for the physical pleasures. This brings them down to a point where they lose out on their religion. Chas v'shalom, and that's what happened to the 10 lost tribes. Another thing that says, in Pirkei Avot, it says that the Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 students. Now, mind you, this is what extent this goes. The first student was Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol. Eliezer Hagadol was the rabbi of Rabbi Akiva. So great was he. Actually, he was the rabbi of all we discussed him last week. Rabbi of superior to all of the rabbis in his time, and despite the fact that he was not the Nasi, the chief rabbi was Rabbi Gamliel. This was one student. Another was Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania, who was called the Hakima Diyudai, the wisest of all the Jews. Cleverness. The 5th one was Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. And the Shner Pirkei Avot says that putting them on a scale, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai would put them on a scale, all the students, plus all the rabbis of the Jews. And he said, take them all combined, and take Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, the last one, alone, put him on the opposite side of the scale. He would outweigh all of them in knowledge. So superior was he. Others say, there's a debate, others say that it was Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol he said it about. In any event, this statement is made in Pirkei Avot. Now the Gemara says, this great Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach, who was known also by his pseudonym Rabbi Nehorai. Nehorai means the great light, tremendous light, because he brought this great light to the Jews with his Torah. He traveled to this city where they had this special superior type of water, and staying there, he was drawn by this. As great as he was drawn into it to a point where he stopped studying Torah, and he forgot his learning. Completely forgot what he had learned. Now, when he came back, he returned from that place. He'd been there for quite a while. Came back to the yeshiva. He went to read, not Gemara, not depth, but Chumash, just to read the words. The first mitzvah in Torah is HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. That is the first mitzvah that Hashem told the Jews when they left Egypt. This month of Nisan, the month of Pesach, the law of Pesach. The first words are HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. This month is for you. Reading out those three words, he said, HaCheresh Haya Libam. In other words, a mistake in every one of the three words. Instead of HaChodesh this month, HaCheresh, which means death. Instead of Hazeh this, he read Haya, was. Instead of Lachem for you, he said Libam, their heart. The whole sentence was changed. HaCheresh Haya Libam, their heart was made deaf. It couldn't hear. You say the heart hears, it means the heart understands. The heart became deafened. So far that he lost his learning. The Yevida says that the rabbis had pity on him. They prayed for him, and his knowledge came back to him. Therefore, it says in Pirkei Avot that using his pseudonym, it says Rabbi Nachman says, leave your home, go to a place to study Torah, and never be sure of yourself. Always continue to study Torah. Never say that you can rely upon others for it. Unless he stressed afterwards how dangerous it is for a person to stop the study of Torah. This is what the Gemara says here. But it would pay to examine these words. There is naturally a message in this. He picked those three words. How come he changed the words around to exactly, you miss a letter, it comes out to a word which has no meaning. Or if it comes out to a word that has a meaning, then it wouldn't have the three words matched so exactly, with a message in them. Plus, how come just these three letters? If we examine it carefully, the Yaakov says, HaChodesh, he changed the Dalet to Eresh, HaCharesh. And one letter he changed was to Eresh. Hazeh he changed to Haya, Eresh and then Yud. Then Lachem he changed to Libam. That's Eresh, Yud, Bet. Eresh, Yud, Bet is Riv, which means Machloket. Machloket, debate, Safek, doubt. Plus the fact that Arizal says that there are Eresh, Yud, Bet, there's 212. There are 212 groups of evil angels. They work under the Satan. And this meant that the person who leaves Torah is attacked by these 212 evil groups. It seems to me what we have learned many times about the importance of learning Torah, how to learn Torah, where to study Torah. There's another message involved here. The difference between one who has a heart that hears, accepts, and absorbs, and one who doesn't is one who learns by himself. The Gemara says one who learns by himself, then it's cherev al-abadim. He deserves the sword. He deserves to be destroyed because his learning is worthless. One who learns with another, especially one who learns from the rabbi, that person is successful in Torah. Now this, Moshe Feinstein warned when he said to leave Torah, above all to leave a rabbi. Three letters that he hid in these words are Resh, Bet, Yud, Nabi. Says when the Nabi is missing, instead of having the Torah shine forth, first mitzvah, Chodesh Hazeh Lachem, you celebrate together the mitzvah of Pesach, you have a Charesh Haya Libam. Because you destroyed the origin of Torah, you're helping out the rabbi. The result is that your heart becomes hardened, fails to absorb, and there is no possible knowledge that can enter. This was the hidden message that Rabbi Nachman gave. We cannot say, of course, that he had lost the knowledge to the point where he couldn't understand it all. Obviously, he had read, prayed. This is just a question of we continue the Shi'ur in Gemara. The Gemara says that there is a time when one person does harm or evil to a second. And the person who was harmed resents it so much that he cries out to Hashem for revenge. Kaviyachol, there is no alternative. Heaven must take revenge for this evil that was done to this person. But the Gemara says that in heaven there is a discredit placed against this person who asked for revenge. Anyone who causes another Jew to be hurt, to be punished because of him, no matter how much that one deserved the punishment, and this person who caused the punishment for a second Jew is never allowed to enter into the surroundings of Hashem in heaven. That's how serious that crime is. The Gemara asks, where do we know this from? Logically, we would say, a person does harm, he deserves punishment. Why, if a person asks for justice to be meted out to someone who deserves punishment, why is he given such a severe punishment himself? Where do we learn that from? What is the origin? The Gemara answers the story of Achav. The Torah tells us that Achav, the wicked king of the Jews, of the 10 tribes, was very jealous of a wealthy man whose name was Navot. This man Navot had a vineyard which was very desirable. The king wanted it, and he asked this Navot to give it to him. Navot refused to sell it to him even. And finally, Achav's wife advised him very simply, kill this man as king. You have a right to kill any person who opposes you. Kill him and take this vineyard for yourself. This Achav did. Now, at this time, Navot was dead. Remember that point. Navot was dead. Then, the Torah says that in heaven there was a meeting. Question of how to go about and having Achav punished for this murder. So, where is the best place to have him punished? In a battlefield. So in heaven, the Torah says, this is in the Navi. Pasuk says, and Hashem in heaven asked, who will volunteer to persuade Achav to go up to battle at a certain point? There he will fall in battle. And the Pasuk says that each one in heaven volunteered a certain means of persuasion. Then the Pasuk says that a spirit came and stood before Hashem and said, I will talk him into it. I will go down and act as a false prophet. I will enter into his prophets as a spirit that will bring out false prophecy and advise him that it is to his advantage, he will be successful in this battle. This way I'll mislead him. He'll go into this battle and he'll be killed. Hashem said, the reply of Hashem was, go down, talk him into it, and you will succeed. Go out and do so. Now, the Gemara explains this pasuk. Who was the spirit? The spirit was the spirit of Nabot. The spirit of Nabot himself volunteered to go down and to eke out vengeance upon Achav. But the Gemara says, notice that Hashem said to the spirit, go out. Go out means leave my presence. You can no longer stay in my presence because you are the one, obviously, that is asking for revenge from Nabot. So the Gemara says, this is no proof. Because the reason that Hashem said go out is, we know for a fact always that Hashem is emet. Hashem is truth and only truth. And the Torah tells us that liars can never enter into the proximity, the closeness of Hashem. One who lies is not accepted by Hashem as admissible to his inner circle. Therefore Hashem said to the spirit, go out. You say you're going down to act as a false prophet, to speak lies, therefore you may not enter into this circle anymore. Which means that there is no further proof that the reason for his being ejected was because he wanted revenge. So we are still left with the question, how do we know that if a person asks Hashem to avenge a wrong done against him, that this person himself is refused admission to the circle of Hashem, close to Hashem? The Gemara answers finally, the fact is, the true origin is from a pasuk in Mishlei, the wise sayings of King Solomon. This pasuk says, Gam anosh la tzadik lo tov. It is not good, even for a tzadik, to punish a Jew. Even a tzadik himself should not seek punishment for a Jew. In other words, if a Jew has harmed him, he should not pray to Hashem for revenge. Hashem himself will take up the side of the tzaddik, and he will eke out punishment upon this person. But the tzaddik should either seek to try to improve this person who harmed him, to make him do Teshuva, or to remain passive, not to punish this person. And the pasuk says, to punish is lo tov, is not good. The Torah never tries not to use a word that is bad, but it does imply not good, meaning it is bad. Where do we find the word bad? The pasuk says that bad cannot live close to Hashem, cannot be within the closeness of Hashem. And therefore, from this pasuk we learn that anyone, even a tzaddik, who causes a second Jew to be punished on his account, that person cannot be close to Hashem. This is the origin. And therefore, the important lesson we learn always is, the best thing, the healthiest thing is, that if a person harms someone, the one that is harmed should be magnanimous, kind enough to still be forgiving. He should still forgive that person. Once he forgives that person, he has gained tremendously, because if he can show that he can overlook an insult or a disgrace caused, brought upon it by a second person, then in heaven they will treat him likewise. Anything he does that is chas v'shalom insulting to heaven, heaven too will overlook. They treat him in the same manner that he treats others. The biggest zechut a person can have is to have his sins forgiven by forgiving others who sin against him. And even if the person is a tzaddik who has the power to punish, he too should overlook. In fact, the bigger the tzaddik, the more forgiving he is. And if that person is one who does not do Teshuva, he should rely upon the justice of Hashem himself, not to seek it. The Gemara tells us a story of a chassid. Chassid means, of course, let's make this clear. Whenever in the Gemara we find the word chassid, the Gemara in Torah says, says that the word chassid specifically used in Gemara applies to only two rabbis. They were Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, he was one of the 10 rabbis who killed the Asad Malchut, or Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai. These are the only two rabbis ever to be called Chassid without using their name. If we just say the word Chassid alone, it means these two rabbis. So, in other words, this story deals with one of the two. Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai, by the way, was so poor, the Gemara says that 6 students had to cover themselves with one coat. That's so they couldn't afford clothing even. Cold, they had to cover themselves with one single coat. The abject poverty. In fact, you find, if you recall, a story with a Chassid. One time when he had just a coin left, he gave it to a poor person, and then his wife became angry. He went and slept at the cemetery. That's how poor he was. That whole story with that Chassid, which was the same rabbi. He later tells about him that he had a small parcel of land, a small field. At one time, the fence was broken on Shabbat, and he decided to repair that fence, because if the fence is broken, animals can come inside, trample the crops, destroy it. He decided to mend the fence. He reminded himself that it was Shabbat, and he stopped, didn't do anything about it, even though it might have been mended or set up again without breaking Shabbat. And because he did this, a miracle happened. A powerful tree rose up there in the place of that broken fence, which served as a fence, and also at the same time this tree gave forth a special type of fruit from which he was able to derive a livelihood. And of course we must understand when we say that he decided not to do it because it was Shabbat, what is the chidush? What is so great? Any person who would remind himself that Shabbat wouldn't do it on Shabbat, even through a goy, or even though the act wasn't exactly breaking Shabbat. The chidush here was that he reminded himself it was Shabbat, and therefore, after Shabbat was over, he refused to mend that fence. He said, if I thought about it on Shabbat, I don't want to ever do anything about correcting it. Because of this miracle happened to him, where Hashem made this tree grow and cover the area so that the broken fence was now mended through heaven. He then says, speaking about poverty, Chas v'shalom, and this might be a bit surprising. And then it tells us, I want to first mention, there is a pasuk in the Torah which says, Ki lo yachtal evyon mikerav haaretz. There must always be poor in this world. There's no time when we have everyone as wealthy. There must be poor people. This, of course, the Gemara tells us, does not mean that the poor are evil. The poor, on the contrary, are liked more by Hashem, and Hashem demands the good treatment of these poor. Also, the poor are here for a reason. The poor give the rich the opportunity for the greatest zechut possible, giving tzedakah. Rabbi Nachman says that a person who is rich should never look down at a poor person and feel that when he gives him a few cents or a few dollars, he is doing him a favor. If a rich man would examine himself honestly, Rabbi Nachman says, he would find that there is no logical reason why he should have so much money that when he gives the poor person a few dollars, he remains wealthy, while this poor person, who is perhaps, or who certainly and many times is much more religious, much more sincere than he is, after receiving this grant, still remains poor. He has a few dollars, he now has what to eat, but he still remains a pauper. Therefore, a person should regard the poor as the chosen ones of Hashem. Now, the Gemara analyzes what is meant by poor. What is this having poor people, and who is struck by this sad plight? The Gemara tells us that a person should always pray to heaven, pray to Hashem, that he should be spared from poverty. By the way, let me mention once more something else the Gemara tells us, not here. The Gemara says that of all the Yisurim that exist, all the types of suffering that exist in this world, the worst suffering is poverty. There is nothing that compares to abject poverty, which means a person really is so poor that he lacks sustenance, food. That's for sure. So the Gemara says that a person should always pray to Hashem to be spared from poverty, because he should know that if he is spared from poverty, then his children will suffer poverty. If they are spared, his grandchildren will suffer poverty. Because this must strike a person at some time. A family tree must come to that person. The pasuk says, "Ki biglal hadavar hazeh." You give charity because of this, Hashem will bless you. Biglal. Why do we say biglal? Because of this. Ki, because. Biglal has another meaning. Glal is like galgal, a wheel. The Gemara says this is a wheel that rotates, and as it rotates, it strikes each person in his time. So each person, all the person's descendants, must be stricken by this poverty. The Gemara tells us, though, Rav Yosef says that a Talmid Chacham, we know, never becomes poor. The fact that we do see that there are poor Talmidei Chachamim, it is true they become poor, but they are never stricken with a high degree of poverty where they must go begging alms at the doorsteps, and knock on doors and beg. This much Hashem does not degrade them. They are poor, they suffer, but don't have to resort to knocking on doors. This means the great Talmidei Chachamim. The other says that Rabbi Chia once said to his wife, when a poor man comes to the door, then hurry and give him bread, give him something to eat, so that when your children will go out begging, in turn, they too will be given something to eat quickly. His wife became furious, knowing that the Chia was somewhere in tzadik. She said, "Are you cursing your children?" So he said to her, "No, of course not. This is a pasuk. Biglal hadavar hazeh. It is a wheel that rotates. If it doesn't strike us, it will have to reach our children or our children's children. In order to ensure them receiving good treatment, let us do this mitzvah now, and we will treat the poor well, so that when our children, chas v'shalom, will become poor, they will go begging, they in turn will be treated well." The Gemara says that a person, the greatest blessing a person can have is to be blessed with the characteristic of kindness and pity upon Jews. Because if he possesses kindness and pity, then and only then does heaven have pity upon him. Only one who pities others, Hashem pities. One who is harsh, unpitying, and there is no pity upon him from heaven, chas v'shalom. Therefore, the greatest blessing the Torah says that Hashem gives to a person is that Hashem will give him the quality of rachamim, of pity. Pasuk says, "V'natan lecha rachamim v'rachamecha." Hashem will give you pity to use for others, and then Hashem will have pity and kindness for you. And therefore, a person who is hard of nature should know that if any harm befalls him, and it seems that there's no pity from heaven, this is the cause. Have pity upon others, and then in turn, heaven will have pity upon you. The Gemara tells us that the difference between life and death, physically. Notice that a child who is only 1 day old, who has no sense, cannot do anything at all as far as mitzvot are concerned, and yet, if the child's life is in danger, then it is a mitzvah to break the Shabbat to save the child. Why? Torah says, break this one Shabbat for the sake of this child, in order that when you save his life, he in turn will observe many more Shabbats later. If you don't break the Shabbat, you have saved one Shabbat from being broken, but you have also lost a life and the future Shabbats will not be observed by this person. Whereas, this is a child 1 day old, whereas the greatest person in the world, let us say even King David, after he has passed away, it is forbidden to break the Shabbat for his sake. Because once he has passed away, he himself is devoid of the possibility of performing mitzvot, and therefore we in turn cannot break any laws for his sake. The Gemara adds, when one is alive, even a child, a day old, who has no physical power whatsoever, yet you can leave this child alone in a room. You don't have to worry about mice attacking the child, because mice detect that there is life in this child and they are afraid. They won't approach him. Whereas, take the greatest giant, take Og Melech HaBashan, the giant Og, as great, as tall, as powerful as he is. Once he is dead, he requires being guarded against mice, against rodents, because only when a person is alive, the pasuk says, are animals afraid of humans. The person is dead, that fear is gone. There's no more reason for an animal to fear a human. Now the Gemara says that Papa says, we have a general rule that animals are afraid of humans, and therefore we know that a lion will never attack 2 people. If he sees 2 people, he will not attack. He'll be afraid to attack. The Gemara asks, we have heard and we have seen cases where lions do attack 2 people or more. Why do you say that a lion will not attack 2 people? The Gemara answers, there it's for a very simple reason. Because we have a general rule of fact that an animal, a wild animal, no matter how powerful he is, cannot rule over a human unless in the eyes of this animal, looking at the human, he thinks he sees another animal. If the animal would see a human in front of him, he would be afraid to attack him. Meaning that if a person conducts himself like a human should, which means pure, above having his own animal instincts, above living like an animal, then he is on a higher level, a higher degree. And the pasuk of Torah says, when Hashem said that I will bless you, I will place the fear of all animals, the fear of human upon all animals. All animals will fear you. That's if you will act like a human being. If not, then of course the animals will regard you as an animal too, and naturally a lion will attack you. That is why we see that lions do attack even 2 people. Of course the question arises, why did the Papa say that a lion will not attack 2 people? If we say that it depends upon a person acting like a human, acting pure, then he wouldn't attack even 1. But if a person does not act pure, he'll attack 2 or more. Why did he say 2? The answer is that when he said 2, he meant 1 person who is composed of 2. What is the difference between an animal and a human? An animal is 1. He has no soul. A human is 1 who has both body and soul. We're not speaking about spirit of life, which everything has. An animal has a spirit of life too. Speaking about a soul which is higher. And therefore, the Papa mentioned this in his words. If an animal sees 2, a human being who is composed of these 2 factors, both body and soul, this lion will be afraid to attack. If he sees only 1, he sees only a body alone, to him that body of a human is the same as an animal. It has no soul. Therefore he will attack. But if there exists a person who is that pure, that his body and soul are both that pure, he possesses both, no lion will attack him. And this was the secret of Daniel going into the lion's den, where he fearlessly came close to them. The lions did not dare to touch him, because they saw in him a tzadik, pure of soul. The Gemara tells us, again, speaking about old age and death, these two topics at length. The Gemara says when a person gets older, the physical parts of his body begin to deteriorate. That is automatic. Even though the person suffers no illness, the parts wear out. Now, there are items that could be harmed no matter what the age of a person is. For example, tears. A person who cries a lot, what are these tears that come out of a person's eyes? The sight of a person is called the light of his eyes. This light is with what a person sees. Now, when a person ceases to see well, we say his eyes became darkened, dimmed. We find the pasuk by Yitzchak Avinu. When Yitzchak Avinu became old, but tichena einav, keha means dark. His eyes became darkened, as though a shadow passed over them, became dark, and therefore he could not see well. The Gemara says that when a person cries, the tears that leave his eyes, that is the light of his eyes. His eyesight goes out in those tears, which means that through tears, a person's eyesight becomes dimmed. Well, the Gemara tells us, strangely, that Rabbi Nachman had a small child, an infant, a daughter, and one day she passed away. Rabbi Nachman did not cry. His wife resented this, felt very badly about this, and she said to him, "You don't cry? What, did you just lose a chicken? That's all it means to you?" Mechlina answered, "Chas v'shalom. Of course I feel badly about it, I feel very sad. But why, after suffering so great a loss, it's called mishakela, Chas v'shalom, one of his children died, I suffer the loss of being mishakel, having a child die, I should also add to it to suffer a degree of blindness? What do I gain? Why should I add to my suffering also partial blindness? Therefore I avoid crying," he said. Now the Gemara tells us to explain more about tears. There are 6 types of tears. 3 are good, which means 3 types of tears. A person cries 3 reasons. This, on the contrary, improves his eyesight. This is healthy. 3 other kinds are ones that impair his eyesight. 3 that are bad are tears that come because of smoke. When there is a fire, when the acrid smoke comes out, causing a person's eyes to tear, this is very harmful, chas v'shalom, to his eyesight. Tears that come because of sadness, a person crying because of sadness, this too does harm to his eyesight. Tears that come because of suffering, pain, this also. These are the 3 that cause harm. 3 that are healthy. 1 is when a person puts soothing medication into his eyes. This causes his eyes to tear. This is healthy for the eyes. 2nd is when a person cries out of laughter. A person many times laughs so hard he actually cries laughing. Tears come from his eyes. Those tears are very healthy and improve the person's eyesight. 3rd, tears that are good, surprisingly, are those tears caused by very sharp, spicy fruit. For instance, mustard, onions, which cause a person's eyes to tear. That is not harmful for the eyes. It may feel discomforting at the time, but it is healthy for the eyes. These are the 3 that are helpful. The Gemara says in general, a person to person's health in general. Health, in this case, meaning his physical well-being, carry himself properly, to be able to walk fast at a steady pace. This can be done through eating. The person fasts, his step is weak and slow. The person eats well, his step is stronger. But what about a person who gets older? His step slows. The older a person is, the slower he walks. What about food helping him then? The greatest doctor of the Gemara was Shmuel, and Shmuel said to his student Rabbi Yehuda, let me teach you this one point. Up to the age of 40, it is vital that you eat in order to receive nourishment and give you strength. Once you reach the age of 40, stress more liquids rather than food. Liquids can do much more benefit to a person after 40 than food can. This, of course, means healthy liquids, not the wrong type of spirits. If a person takes spirits, he eventually turns into a spirit himself. And this, of course, too, means that he should not live only on liquids after the age of 40. It means that he should have a major part of his meal should be liquid rather than heavy food. This way, he'll retain that stronger, healthful step and be able to walk with a better carriage, carry himself better. We should be zocheh to spend our youth properly, eat the right food, which means, Benadol says, eat Torah. And in our older age, to drink properly, drink from the waters of Torah, and that way we'll have a full, rich life. We'll be zocheh to see in our time the coming of Mashiach, b'yam Bet HaMikdash. Amen. Amen.